Hello, welcome back to the PowerX training video series. In today's video, we're going to cover our scroll pump maintenance. We're going to talk about how we grease and change the tip seals on our scroll air ends. This will cover the 3 horsepower scroll pumps, the 5 horsepower scroll pumps, both standard and high pressure versions of the E-Series pump. We're going to go ahead and get started. The maintenance needed for these pumps, the 3 horsepower pump is the same for both the standard pressure and the high pressure version, just the run hours, the required maintenance changes. So on a 3 horsepower pump that's running at standard pressure, you need to change the tip seals and grease the pump every 10,000 hours. When that 3 horsepower pump runs at high pressure, you're going to change those tip seals every 5,000 hours. Now the 5 horsepower pump, you have a standard pressure pump and you have a high pressure pump. These are 2 different pumps. The standard pressure pump gets its maintenance done at 10,000 hours, and the high pressure version of the 5 horsepower pump gets its maintenance done at 5,000 hours. The part numbers are different between the standard pressure tip seals and the high pressure tip seals. The 3 horsepower tip seals stays the same for both versions. The grease is universal for all the scroll pumps. Okay, before we get started with the instruction on how to do the tip seals and replacement, I wanted to go ahead and break down everything that you're going to need to do the PM on the pump. You're going to need a PowerX grease gun, a tube of the special scroll grease. Okay, this is the grease tube. Goes inside of the grease gun. You're going to need a heat insulation pipe, and you're going to need a tip seal set. So the tip seal sets are specific for what pump you have: 3 horsepower, 5 horsepower, or 5 horsepower high pressure. I'm going to go ahead and open up the tip seal kit. Okay, so inside of our tip seal set, I'm going to go ahead and get this opened up here for you. We have our tip seals and our dust seals and backup tube. So each one of these, we can pull them out one at a time. Here we have our dust seal. This is the last seal that goes on the fixed side of the scroll, and we have the backup tube that goes with it. So our dust seal sits on top of the backup tube. When it's installed in the pump, the backup tube creates a spring to keep dust and things from getting sucked into the pump. The lighter color ones are the low pressure tip seals. There's one of these for each the fixed scroll and the orbiting scroll. Okay, they are particular for which side they're going to go on. Depending on which sides our notches are on the tip seal, will tell you if this is going to go on the fixed side or the orbital side. It will not go. They're not interchangeable. Vice versa. One's got to go on one, and one's got to go on the other. Same with our high pressure tip seals. So we have our high temperature sealed for our orbiting scroll, and our high pressure tip sealed for our fixed scroll. I'm going to see if the camera will zoom in on these. Okay, so if we look really closely, we can see how we have ridges on 2 sides, this side and this side of the tip seal, and then we have a flat on this side and this side of the tip seal. So these will go in depending on which way these notches are in the groove. So when we pull your old tip seals out, you want to make sure that these are going in the same direction as the original one so they don't go in backwards. You put your tip seals in backwards, you're going to lose compression. The pump won't perform as good as it should. Okay, we're going to move on and start taking this pump apart. Okay, tools we're going to need to do this maintenance. We're going to need a socket, 17mm socket, a Phillips screwdriver, and a small pick or pen to remove the tip seals. So I went ahead and zoomed in on the pump, make it a little bit easier to see. This example of the pump we're working on today, this is a 5 horsepower high pressure pump. We know that. PowerX label on the front of the pump tells us that this is an SLAE 05 EHP. That tells us it's a 5 horsepower high pressure air end. So airflow on the pumps, our air intake is right up here on top. For single scroll pump applications, usually the filter just goes right onto here. If you have a multiplex pump unit, this is going to go over to your intake manifold piping where all the pumps group together from a larger main filter. We have our discharge nipple on the pump. This is where our hot compressed air comes out of the pump and gets pumped over towards the aftercooler to cool the air down. We have our ducting system on this side of the pump. So as the belts spin our pulley on our pump, there's a fan inside of here that blows air over and across the pump and discharges out this side to help keep the air end cool. Doesn't get too hot. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start dismantling the pump. Okay, so we have most of our bolts out here. I'm going to talk real quick about our discharge nipple. Go ahead and pull it out. Here on the discharge nipple we have our heat insulation pipe. We recommend that these get changed every 10,000 hours or 5,000 hours whenever you do your grease or your tip seal changes. You want to go ahead and replace this heat insulation pipe as well. We're going to go ahead and separate our halves of our pump. Okay, so here we can see we have our fixed scroll half and our orbiting scroll half. So the fixed half stays fixed, the orbiting scroll half rotates inside, creating our air pressure. So we're going to take a step back, we're going to zoom in a little closer and talk about how we replace these tip seals. Okay, so here we are zoomed in on the orbital side of the scroll pump, and we can see we have our high pressure internal seal and then our low pressure internal seal, which is white. So this is pretty standard to see the gray and the white, different colors. Now we need to go ahead and remove I like to start on the inside, and I like to use a small pick other than a pen or a little screwdriver just to kind of get in here and grab that tip seal. So you're going to see that tip seal is kind of coming out. We're going to pull these tip seals out of the pump. Now I like to stop right here to make sure I'm going to be putting my new tip seal in correctly. So if we look really closely, like we talked about earlier, look really closely, we can see the notch side of the tip seal on both sides. So we know then if we have our new tip seal, so here's our new tip seal. I'm going to try to, our new tip seal, we can go ahead and look at our edges on both sides, and then we can go ahead and start our new tip seal to make sure that we have it in there the correct direction. Okay? We want to get it as close to the front edge as we can, and we can start putting it in, and then we can go ahead and pull out the rest of the tip seal. Okay, we're going to go ahead and continue installing our high pressure tip seal here. Okay, should end right here on the lip on the high pressure side. Then we're going to go ahead and install our low pressure tip seal. Can make sure my grooves are lined up correctly. Go ahead and get it started. I'm trying to put them in backwards. Okay. So here on the pump, you can't see it, there's a little notch right here. So we're going to go ahead and push that tip seal over that notch and press it down. And it'll shed some material off the sides of the new tip seal. You want to make sure that you clean that material up. It's not left in there before you put your pump back together. Go ahead and install this tip seal the rest of the way. Okay, sometimes on your new seals they're a little bit longer, a little bit extra length there, so we would go ahead and just snip that off and put it down the rest of the way. Next we're going to go ahead and do the fixed side of the scroll. Here we are on the fixed side of the scroll, and we have our high pressure tip seals and our low pressure tip seals, same gray and white. We also have the addition of the dust seal, and inside the dust seal, or underneath the dust seal I should say, we have a dust tube also. These also get replaced, so you're just going to pull that tube out. Tube creates like a spring that gets pushed onto the dust seal. So we would change our high pressure tip seal and our low pressure tip seal. They come in our set, and then we would replace our tube and our dust seal on top of that. So once we get all this done and all put back together, you want to make sure you clean everything out, wipe out the inside of both the fixed and orbital scrolls before reassembly. I'm going to go ahead and finish this up right now. Okay, with our tip seals replaced, we're going to go ahead and talk about greasing the pump. Okay, here we are looking at the front of the pump again. We're going to be talking about how to grease our pin crank bearings. So we have pin crank bearing here, here, and here on the pump. The amount of grease that the pin crank bearings get depends on what horsepower pump and how many times the pump has been greased before. So the first time we're going to do that, we're going to use our PowerX grease gun. Make sure you use the PowerX grease. That is the only grease that can be put into a scroll pump. We are going to line it up with the grease zerk. We're going to hold it nice and tight on there. And for the first time on a 5 horsepower high pressure pump, this grease gun or pin crank bearing will grease 7 pumps of the grease gun. So we go ahead and do all 3 of these. Oh, there's a little notch on the end there. Make sure you get the notch in the right spot. Okay, I'll try to show you the notch here on the grease gun. Let's make sure you can get past the side orbital scroll here when greasing that bearing. So I just had to make sure I spun the gun so it would line up. So our other bearing that we need to grease is our OS bearing. And that bearing is on top of the pump under this little protective cover. I'll go ahead and tilt the pump over so you can see the hole here. So what we would do is we would spin the pump around until we see the bearing zerk in the hole. Okay, there it is. I'm going to take the grease gun, put it down there, make sure I can feel that zerk, which I can. Oops. So I can feel that zerk bearing, which I can. We're going to hold our grease gun, try to find a good angle for the camera here. Hold that grease gun nice and taut on there, and the 5 horsepower scroll pump OS bearing for the first grease, you can get 7 pumps. Okay, there we go. So the next thing that we want to make sure of, now everything is greased, put my dust cap back on. So on the fan side of the pump, you want to make sure that you blow out this fan, make sure it's nice and clean. Be careful not to bend any fins or get the fan out of balance at all. So this is good and clean. We've greased our OS bearing, we've greased our pin crank bearings, and we replaced our tip seals. So from here, we want to make sure that the inside of our scroll fins are good and clean, wiped out, both on the orbital and the fixed side. And we're going to go ahead and put the pump back together. Okay, a quick note here on tightening up the fixed scroll bolts and nuts on the pump. We're going to tighten these down the first time to 17 inch-pounds, and then you want to make sure that you can still spin the pump. So tighten it down, make sure we can spin the pump nice and smooth counterclockwise direction on the motor pulley or the fan pulley, and then we're going to come back and we are going to tighten these down a second time to 265 inch-pounds on all these bolts. Make sure you do a nice cross star pattern when you're tightening these up so everything goes down nice and even and smooth. Okay. The other thing I want to mention is on the discharge tube. Our discharge tube here, when we screw this in, there's 2 ways that we can do this. We're going to screw this in and we can get it hand tight and then put a wrench on here and tighten it up a half a turn. Or if we want to know a torque spec, our torque spec is 188 inch-pounds for how tight this discharge nipple is going to be on the pump. So normally, get the thing hand tight, give it a half a turn, and it's going to be good. We don't want this to come loose and shoot out of the pump down the road. We'll go ahead and finish assembling this pump. we are. Okay, here's our scroll pump all put back together. New tip seals, new grease, and it is ready to go back on your unit to make another 5,000 or 10,000 hours worth of air until the next PM service is required. I hope this video was helpful. Thank you and have a great day.